tax homes. While some may say it's the stuff of their nightmares, we say it's the stuff of our dreams. I know. Crazy? Definitely crazy. But the reason is because once tax homes is broken down, you realize it's the key to a lot of the benefits of travel therapy.
Before we start with this video, we want you to know we are not tax professionals. We're just travel physical therapists that have went through this a little bit. But if you have any questions for your own certain situation, we definitely recommend you go to traveltax.com, and you can even call up them, contact them for any more specific questions. Some of you might be new to this whole travel therapy thing. You're looking into it. You might be a student or recently a graduate of a therapy program. And you keep hearing this word tax home, and you're like, what is this tax home thing that my recruiter's talking about, that Megan and Ryan are talking about, that other travel therapists are talking about? And so let's just start off this video with just a quick definition that we got from the IRS. Generally, a tax home is an entire city or general area where you do a majority of your business, or where you work, where you make the majority of your money.
So keep that definition in mind as we break that down and go through commonly asked questions to help you understand what a tax home is and why it's so important.
That leads us into one of our first questions, and that is, why is a tax home so important? And the reason why knowing what a tax home is and why is it so important for travel therapists is because that is how you earn your tax-free stipends, or sometimes they're called per diems. If you do not maintain a tax home, then you can't get these tax-free benefits.
And this money comes in the form of per diems, which is money to cover your housing and your food costs. And this money actually makes up about half of our income as travelers.
A good portion. So you want to make sure that you're getting those benefits, as that's how we kind of make more money as travelers compared to permanent therapists.
Exactly.
Now, do you have to have a tax home? And the answer is no, but you would be considered an itinerant worker, meaning you do not get that tax-free money. All the money that you would earn on your travel assignment would be taxed. And that means you're probably missing out on 1.5 to 2 times the amount of money that you could be earning on that same assignment.
Now, all this might sound kind of fishy. You're getting income tax-free. Is that even legal? And the answer is yes, it is. It is a system that the government has put in place for people that are traveling for work, such as pilots, electricians, and healthcare workers. This is for out-of-town costs when they're away from their tax home, like lodging and food. So that could be for a pilot who's away from home 2 to 3 days of the week, or it could be for therapists who are away from home for 13-week contracts.
And this tax break is really there because you're going to end up showing dual expenses. And so you're paying for rent or a mortgage in your tax home or near your tax home. But then when you're gone on travel assignments, or like a pilot going to stay in a hotel for 2 or 3 nights while they're in a city they just flew to, they need that housing costs covered. And so then that shows dual expenses, and that's why you get that tax break.
So this brings us to the question of how to maintain a tax home. And in order to maintain a tax home, you have to meet at least 2 of the 3 requirements that are set out by the IRS.
So the first requirement is to maintain regular business in your tax home. And this is most often met by employment. So if you're working a permanent job in your area, then that's why that would allot you to that tax home.
The second requirement is that you have a permanent physical residence that you upkeep by rent or taxes.
Yeah, so this can be met with if you pay your mortgage, if you pay rent, taxes on a certain home, repairs, those little things. And the third one is that you don't abandon your tax home, meaning you return for at least 30 days per year.
So travelers typically end up meeting the latter 2 requirements of these 3 in order to have a tax home.
What that looks like for us is that we rent a room from my family, so we're paying rent in our tax home, and then we return, of course, 30 days of the year and keep track of that.
So that shows dual expenses. We have rent for our home, and we have rent for wherever we're traveling to.
And that's how we end up maintaining a tax home and get those tax-free stipends. Do you have to turn in proof that you're maintaining your tax home to the IRS each year? And the answer is no. The only time you'd have to turn in proof would be if they audited you. Now, the IRS is able to audit you many years in the past, and so we definitely recommend having the records to prove that you have been maintaining your tax home. Because if you have not been maintaining your tax home but have been accepting those tax-free stipends while on travel contract, then you may have to pay a bunch of penalties and back taxes. And that's not good.
No, not fun.
Travelers typically ask, can I just write down an address then? Like my parents' address? And the answer is no, because you're not showing any financial responsibility in your so-called tax home. The IRS expects a little bit more from you. But no fear, we have a list of things that would be good to keep for your records, just in case you get audited.
So the first one is you want to have a signed contract between you and whoever you're renting from, and keep proof of that to show that you do in fact have a legal binding contract that shows dual expenses in your home environment.
So this could easily look like if you own a home and your tax home and you're paying mortgage payments, there's your binding contract. Those mortgage payments will be plenty for the IRS. Now, if you're like us who rent a room from my parents, then you'll want a formal lease. And so each year we write a formal lease, all parties sign it. So my mother, me, and Megan sign it. And on there it tells how much that we pay her for, what for the utilities. It has to be official.
In order to determine how much we're going to pay her in rent, we research on Craigslist and on Facebook what rooms are renting for in the area. And that's something you also want to keep records of. You're going to want to find those search items and print them off so that you have proof that that was a true market value for the rooms that you're renting.
Yeah, so sometimes you get in these big travel companies and recruiters will just tell you, we'll just pay $5 through Venmo to your mom. That's not going to work. The IRS is not going to like that. That's the wrong thing to do. You need to pay rent at market value. So go on to your Facebook marketplaces, your Craigslist, anywhere else that you can find to rent a room or rent a home or rent an apartment and see what the market value is. You want to keep a paper trail of those payments. And so even though you might be paying your parents a fair market price, if you're just Venmoing the money, that's probably not going to cut it. So what we like to do is we actually write out a paper check and send it to my parents. And then that gives us paper physical proof to go back on if we ever get audited.
So we have a file of pictures of all of the checks that we have sent to his parents' bank account, and those serve as the proof that we did in fact pay for the room.
Now that money is legally my parents, and so they are earning income on the rents that they are earning from renting out the room to us, so it is legally theirs.
Yes, and legally they should claim it as income on their tax return.
That's something a lot of people don't mention, and sometimes it gets surprising, but if you were ever to get audited and then they got audited, they have to claim that as income. So keep that in mind. Now that money is legally theirs. They can go and take a vacation, they could buy a boat, or if they happen to give a rather large birthday present back to us,
they can choose to do
they can choose to do whatever they want with that money. Each year around tax time, we will go back over this lease that we have signed with my parents, and you need to do this each year and update that market price. And so you go back into Craigslist, you get you a few more listings, because just like anything else, prices inflate and you need to be paying the proper price. And you can't just sign a lease that has you're going to stay in that room indefinitely. It needs to be year to year.
So we update that lease every year. We update the amount of rent that we're paying every year. And some other things that you do need to keep track of are also your receipts back home. So if you remember, that third criteria for qualifying as having a tax home is being there for 30 days of the year. And you have to have proof of that. So what we do is we make sure that we use our credit card to pay for something when we get in town. And we at least make sure we buy something the day that we get there and the day that we leave. That way it has the address of the place that we took it back in our tax home, and it has our names attached to it, and it has the date. We take pictures of those and we keep them as records. If we can buy anything in between those days, that's additional records as well.
Yeah. So you want to make sure you do that for the 30 days, and that just shows that you didn't abandon your tax home, and just never return to it.
Right. A couple other things that you need to keep a record of are your actual contracts. This proves that you, in fact, were out of town and away from your tax home. Second, you need to keep track of the distance of travel to get to that contract. So it might be traveling from your tax home to the contract, or from a current travel contract to the new one. So you can do that by going on Google Maps and putting 2 pins down and then printing out the distance in between those to prove that you did have to travel that distance and therefore pay for those travel expenses from A to B. It's also good to have the dates that you actually traveled. You should have this as proof from your previous contract end date to your new contract start date as proof of your travel date, but that one can vary with the situation.
Yeah, this just satisfies that travel reimbursement that you're going to get to go to a contract, and it shows that you used that money. You'll also want to keep the rents that you're paying wherever your travel assignment is. So whether you're renting a short-term apartment or, like for us, an RV site, then we keep track of those payments either by a receipt or a paper check.
All of these recommended records that we just reviewed will actually be included in our blog post on jointmovementdpts.com. We will have a tax home blog post where I have an added link to files that are already organized and they already tell you what you need. So if you're interested in getting that, head on over to our website, and I'll also have the link to the blog in the description.
Now let's talk about some common questions or misconceptions that usually come up when we're talking about tax homes. The first one is the 12-month rule. And so what that looks like is you can't stay in one location for greater than 12 months. This means taking a contract for greater than 12 months, because by staying in one area for 12 months, that can cause your tax home to move to that location.
Right, so if you work at a contract for 12 months, you're considered a permanent therapist and no longer a traveler, which means you're not eligible for those per diems or tax-free stipends anymore.
And this doesn't run on a calendar year, it runs on like a 2-year calendar. So 12 months out of the 2 years would disqualify you.
The next common misconception is the 50-mile rule. A lot of people will kind of quote this as a standard distance that you have to be away from home in order to be a traveler. And they'll say, well, as long as my contract is 50 miles away from my home, I qualify. And that is a myth. It's not on the IRS website anywhere, and tax professionals don't recommend it. Essentially, you must be far enough away that it is unreasonable for you to commute back home while working that job. You have to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you need that secondary lodging, to prove that you have dual expenses, to prove that you should earn that tax-free income. This also means that if you are traveling to a location for your contract and you have to have secondary lodging, you also have to pay for that secondary lodging. You can't live with a family member and not pay them. So that's another thing to make sure you are abiding by and documenting. So that was our review of what tax homes are, how to maintain them, what kind of documentation you need, and some common questions that are asked but may or may not be true. We hope that this video was helpful for you. If you have questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. We may direct you to some of our most trusted resources for the answers, but all in all, we hope that this helps you in your journey of becoming a travel therapist, and thank you for joining us today. Until next time,
see ya.
I love this life with